Thanks for joining. David Aikens is my name. I'm from Cisco. I'm what's called a collaboration sales specialist at Cisco. And I actually cover the areas in both Canberra, so the federal market, and also defence down there. I've got Liam today as well.
Liam McDonald. I'm a peer of David's collaboration sales specialist. Cover Victoria for enterprise and transport, and also have Tasmania.
This morning we just wanted to, or this afternoon now, is just go through what we've done here is just around some of the intelligent workspaces. So just take you through some of the details around what we're doing there, particularly around the video endpoints and spaces as well. I suppose first of all is just to point out the portfolio that's certified for Microsoft Teams. So this is the existing portfolio that's all covered, right from the Board Pro to the co-creation device, up to the room bar, right across to RoomKit EQ. So a whole variety of different spaces that can be addressed by this portfolio. I suppose that's the other thing to point out here is, so these are the existing portfolio. The commitment from Cisco, from the business unit here, is that any future products that get released in this area will also be certified for Microsoft Teams. So just from a planning point of view, this just gives good confidence to the market around what's happening in this pretty exciting area.
Yeah, I guess from a partner aspect as well, there's no confusion around is it a Cisco endpoint, it is a Microsoft endpoint, it is one fleet. So take it out of the box, turn it on, and literally choose whether you want it to be Cisco native or Microsoft Teams native. So it's a really nice kind of capability whereby, you're not having to build run books based on different kind of hardware or capabilities. It's just one and the same, and then just matching it to the customer's platform of choice.
Also some big commitment towards this circular economy, circular design around both packaging and the actual product itself. So there's a big commitment to move towards this whole sort of design process by FY25, so just 12 months away. The other options within this portfolio, I just wanted to point out to you, so if you're working in or have any relationship with sort of defence-related industries, there's also the option to purchase this portfolio in no radio variants as well. So it just helps for that sort of security standpoint. And in a similar view is just around the country of origin. So we also have these products also available in a made in Mexico variant as well, which can be important for some customers.
Okay, so I guess obvious question, when this partnership got announced, a lot of people were curious, how's it going to work? We've done other things in the past. What we've actually built here is the capability where Cisco and Microsoft have now deployed Microsoft Teams rooms on top of Cisco hardware. However, we've maintained the Cisco OS underneath, and that's really important. So what it means is that as we deploy new capabilities to our fleet, think, tweaks to audio intelligence. So we've got a great noise cancelling algorithm that's built into the hardware. We've got a new version of it coming. Because we've maintained our room OS underneath, we can continue to develop new features, capabilities, and profiles, deploy it to the native code, and then it just enhances the Microsoft Teams experience over the top of it. So you're never kind of shoehorned into this idea that somehow you buy that model of the thing, we bring out a new feature, but it was only on that version of it. We're actually there present running underneath it. So as we deploy new capabilities around, sensors, data, any of those parts around it, you'll see a little bit of that in the platform today. You can rest assured that it actually provides a uniform experience across any meetings platform. So, Microsoft supports going to Zoom. So if the camera intelligence is built in and we bring out a new capability, it'll work in the Zoom meeting, it'll work in the Microsoft meeting, and it'll work in the WebEx meeting. So that way there's that protected investment in us, and then we can continue to basically iterate and deploy and develop the hardware and capabilities. When you start talking around the capabilities, so some of the things that some people be used to, but maybe are new to other people, is things around interoperability. So as we said before, Microsoft will allow you to go to Zoom meetings. A little unique with us though, when you actually join a WebEx meeting from a Microsoft Teams room, it'll actually pull through the WebEx UI. So you will actually get the native WebEx experience when you're in there. So that means that if you get invited to a WebEx meeting, but you're on the Microsoft Teams platform of choice, when you're actually in that meeting, you can be in breakout rooms, you can send reactions, so you get that full native experience without having a diminished kind of UI or anything in it. When the call hangs up, it'll go straight back to being a Microsoft Teams room. There's no, and to be clear, it doesn't reboot, it doesn't do anything silly where, you're having to put printed out PDFs telling people how to switch between. It is native and it is just a different color button. So a user walks into a room and it's as simple as looking for the purple, green, or blue join button. They push it and they get that native experience based on the platform of choice that they're going to. Things around camera intelligence. Every one of our units, we've moved away. We still do the glass PTZ cameras, but for the meeting room experience, we've got 4K cameras built into every unit. We've actually trained a machine learning algorithm to recognize faces and software. So then we can deploy workloads whereby you can see in that top area there, we're removing dead space from the room. So if you're sat that 4 to 5 meters away, we'll actually crop out everything around you. That's really important. Like today, we're on a Microsoft Teams meeting. We've got a presentation going and we've got David and I. We're probably looking like little matchsticks inside of the room, but if you deploy it on our tech, we actually will bring that person into the room. So when they start talking and asking questions to the presenter, you're actually reading and reacting the face and body language, as opposed to looking that kind of God mode view of into a room where all you can see is seats, chairs, and little people on them. Lastly, content sharing. So what happens when you don't get an invite to a meeting that's native? This happens a lot in the C-level. Trying to explain to anyone in the C-suite why their meeting room endpoint that they paid a lot of money for can't go to GoToMeeting or whoever it is that they've invited it to is pretty embarrassing. I used to be an engineer, never looked good when I had to have that conversation. We actually now support USB-C standard as pass-through. Things like, for content sharing, Miracast, most people are very comfortable now. Push Windows K, get a little code in the top of the unit for that security overlay, and then you can natively share your content up wirelessly. It also means for people who are then deploying new workloads and profiles, do you actually want a HDMI cable out there? Because we see laptops iterating over and over. We're at USB-C now. What's next? We're not sure of. And it moves you away from that ugly cat o' nine tails with a bunch of dongle adapters and things on the table. Worst thing that happens with those is they usually get pinched as well, and then you're having to buy more. So putting out experiences that people are very comfortable with these days, and then allowing it to be monitored, maintained, and kind of run at a high level function. Now, where we're going to go to is within the control hub around the workspaces and our platform. But how we get it there is that this is the touch panel that we ship with every one of our endpoints. One of the nice parts about it is it actually comes with temperature, humidity, and air quality sensors built into it. Now, to be clear, it's not a license, it's not an add-on, it's not an upsell, it's native in the endpoint. So everything we're going to cover today is covered in the cloud registration of that endpoint. All of the capabilities are built into the platform. You turn them on and off at your own will. Everything comes off by default because, Cisco is a security company as well, and privacy does matter. So you can then deploy these capabilities individually within technology, build a confidence in them, start measuring the data, and then start introducing them into the business. Nice parts around it as well is there's also future things in there. There's LiDAR built into that. So we're building in a raft of things whereby we might not know where the market's going with it, but it's there that it can be consumed at a later date. And again, just running as a native Microsoft Teams interface. So it's that same look and feel that people are used to, and you can see you've got your purple and your green button there. In terms of experience overlays, so all of the intelligence that we built into our cameras, this is that great part about our iOS being underneath it. So you're in a Teams meeting, but you've still got access to the endpoint controls. You literally just swipe right on the panel. You can get at the audio treatments, change the noise cancelling, turn it on, turn it off, grab your actual layout that you want, whether it's speaker track, framing, and so forth. And again, it's just, you're not rebooting, you're not switching things, you're doing it native within Microsoft Teams. You can still get that full Teams experience, so all the emojis, everything that you want to push into the actual meeting, and then control the room from the endpoint as well. Go for it, mate.
It's just a great example, actually, just bringing those technologies together and just how we can address some sort of common problems that customers experience when deploying this technology. So there's one view that Cisco's been speaking about quite a bit is around this cinematic meetings experience. So you might be familiar with views such as speaker track or speaker view, where the loudest speaker in the room is the prominent view within the conference. There's also presenter track, where the camera will track people across an auditorium or stage. What Cisco is talking about here, and you can just see it here in this diagram, is this concept of cross view. And what this is about is just how where you might have a standard rectangular meeting room with a codec camera system up the front of the room and panel. But what this introduces is 2 additional pan tilt zoom cameras on either side. And what that's designed to do is to capture a conversation that's happening across the table and that camera intelligence will then pick up that person's face and also the direction of the audio, so that when they start to look into the conference, the camera system tracks that person to the front of the conference. So just bring a much richer experience to that remote participant.
So a really good example is Brad and I actually did this a few years back in a boardroom. It can be done today in Cisco codecs, but it takes months of engineering and planning and things like that. We deployed it. It worked really well. Now what we're trying to do is automate it and turn it into just a capability that you turn on and off. So we will literally look for the faces in the software. We will find the directional audio, and then we'll grab those sidebar conversations. So if two people are off to the side at the end of the room, that quad camera is not really going to get these two talking at a profile level. You'll get the side view, but not that kind of area. Whereas the camera will grab it, pull in those two and pull them to the forefront of the meeting. And that's really important, because I think what we easily forget is that it's actually all about the remote end when it comes to meeting room experience. It's not actually about what's happening in the room with it. So if it's doing its job well, you don't even know what it is. So, got a question?
Is there a limit to how many cameras?
3 at the moment. So so basically what we've got to do is we've got to train the machine learning loads again. So where we've gotten it down to framing and cropping and things like that, now what we've got to do is pull in multi-framing, multi-cropping, because you're almost looking for dominant voice. And then it's back to, remember when we had speaker track and we used to have to almost time it out, because if it was too quick, it was nauseating for the remote end. It's similar to this again, because you've got to remember, we'll be going from side to side, back to front, but we're trying to follow the natural flow of that language. So we're training it at the moment. We're training it with 3, and then the view would be to introduce more. That's one of the important points as well around the idea of what we're doing with the newer integrated level codecs is supporting things like audio over Ethernet, and we want to do cameras over Ethernet, because that's something that we've seen a demand for in the market.
Is this just WebEx at the moment?
No. Again, so the important part around everything here, and this, we process everything in hardware on the endpoint. Every single one of our endpoints has an NVIDIA GPU in it, right down to the desk unit. It's also a reason why, if anyone asks why the last series of endpoints didn't get certified for Microsoft Teams, because we didn't have that GPU in there, which meant we couldn't provide the same level of experience from a huddle room to an auditorium. And because we do it in hardware, this would be into a Zoom meeting. This will be into a Microsoft meeting. This will be into, even if you do USB-C pass-through, because we're actually processing it on board on the endpoint. It's a really nice capability of ours. You know, the noise cancelling algorithm actually runs in the endpoint. So we're not pumping off streams to someone else's cloud, because that's privacy and security. We've done the security thing before, and it's never a fun one if you've kind of got to go, yeah, it's going here, because that's PII and all those other things.
It's intelligent, but is this allowing us to also select those other cameras as the secondary cast?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So you can still do your normal workflows whereby, so, you know, the multi-use of this room, pull the table out. Do I actually want to set like a presenter view? Maybe you're doing like the preacher sermon like today from behind the pulpit. So you'd set one of those cameras with a predictive view. This is the dynamic view of it. So what you're saying is all right, people go in the room, set it to cinematic. They'll literally swipe right, hit the camera, go cinematic as opposed to frames. And then the endpoint does all the hard work for it. You turn it on when you get above 4 people in this room. You know what I mean? Like if you've got 2 people on and you've got cinematic mode, all it's going to be doing is this, whereas you just load in more bodies and then you make the room work in the profile that you want it to.
Which codecs support these?
It will be EQ and our Codec Pro, because they're the ones that take multi-camera inputs. Bar units don't take additional cameras just because of the profile and workload that we see them doing in a room. Room bar, for example, is a really good unit that's huddled through to 6 people. Room bar has actually got a 108-degree field of view, can take 2 monitors and an external mic. So you can pretty much put 1 unit into 60% of your meeting rooms. But if you put an additional camera into it, you're making the unit do something that it shouldn't be doing. It's almost like where someone kind of goes to me, what about if I put a room bar into a 10-person meeting room? Well, we've actually got depth of field recommendations on all of our cameras. It's something that we publish. If you want it, we can give it out. And that way you can actually match, because this is back to what I was saying about capability. We make sure that the same capabilities are in every unit, and then it more becomes about profile matching of room, bums on seats, to then the hardware. So then you're not having to guess and go, oh, well, that unit does that feature, that. They all do the same features. It's then just profile mapping against it. So it'll be EQ and Codec Pro with these, because they are the integrator level units. Because if you've got 3 cameras, you need more microphones. You need more external speakers. Putting a tiny unit in and then expecting it to perform, not really fair on the unit. Roombar Pro will take external mics, won't do an external camera. So again, because it's cinematics for more for large scale room, and it really, what we're trying to do is match the profile to. Bar Pro is that sweet spot of 10 to 12 where you can push it to, really good depth of field on it. But again, it's a all-in-one unit. So if you're putting it into a room, you don't want external speakers or mics, so you're not going to the integrator level. If you're going to 3 cameras, you've got a big room. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't put 3 cameras into a small, 4x4 meeting room. It wouldn't really be worth the investment.
Showing, I suppose, a common problem in the open office area when deploying video with some of this camera intelligence. So the one example we have here is where we start to put out these great units that can pick up faces, but there might be a conference going on. Someone could be walking past, and then they all of a sudden are in the conference. So we've got a great example of this in our own office at North Sydney, where we have glass running down the side of our main meeting room. And on the other side of that meeting room, there's also a very large TV set. So newsreaders often come into the conference. So typically, if you think about how we would normally solve for that problem, would be by introducing curtains or blinds or frosted glass into that area. This allows us to do is to set up meeting zones, and that the camera will only then pick up people that are in that defined zone. So that can be established from the touch panel from in the meeting room. And then as people walk past, as it's showing here, they don't become part of the conference. So sort of very important as we start to deploy this stuff out, particularly into open plan office style environments.
All right, so how do all these experiences, sensors and everything relate back to kind of getting the data out and the management layer of it? So what we've built is Cisco Control Hub. Going to run through just a condensed version of some of the things that we've touched on. So you've seen the experience for the user, but what does it mean for the operational staff or the people who actually want to measure what's happening in these spaces? So within the Control Hub, nice part around this is that you can actually manage the entire Cisco portfolio out there. So historical as well, SX, MX, Room Series, and then today. Means you can co-mingle as well, because not everyone's going to have budget to refresh everything straight away. They may have an intent to go to Microsoft Teams rooms at the start with a small amount, still have their legacy Cisco kit there. They can use CVI interop from us and places like that. And that mode, they're still doing an entire fleet management from one portfolio and one platform. What we then get is the ability then to apply treatments over it. So it'll integrate with your SSO, your IDP. You can put 2-factor in and things like that. We're not trying to introduce dualities or new sources of truth. We want to use the customer's source of truth, because that's going to help when you start going through the security kind of pass through and vetting. Things like, then getting insights out of that data. So when we go into a workspace, so at an individual layer, you're looking at Celsius Roombar. So this is a Roombar in operation, and you can get your real-time data as well as your environmental data. So we can see that the room is occupied, there are 2 people in it, but the device is idle. So below that, then we get the ambient level noise and the sound noise. Really good one for the sound treatments is actually we can run an RT60 test inside of the unit. So we'll actually give you an acoustic score of the room. Really important when people go build really nice buildings with lots of concrete, glass, polished areas. Sound tends to reverberate, bounce around. We'll actually let you know how the unit's performing and what you can do with it. Other areas as well is like the actual people presence detection. So things like if someone walks into the room, the unit should wake up. They shouldn't have to go up and touch the panel to do it. Again, the camera is always on. It's literally looking for faces. We've trained it to. Someone walks in, detects movement, unit wakes up. So go. Yep. Yes, 100%. Yes. And we publish all the APIs and don't charge for access to them either, because that's important. That's at an individual layer. Now you go across time. So you saw the real time, and then when you want to go across time. So what we've done is we've clicked on the view more in terms of the utilization metrics. And what we can do is we can wind this out across 2, 24, 7, 30. If you need above 30, API it out, pull it to the platform of choice, so then you can run your models across it to see what's happening in it. things around it, we can actually then start seeing what the trend of capacity is in it. A lot of people, when they start looking at new buildings and areas like that, they'll engage an architect, they'll come in and they'll have these great grand ideas of 12 people meeting rooms and huge spaces. Turn it into a data conversation. Actually take the average head count in the room, provide that out via API over time so that when you're actually looking at workspaces and talking to property teams and people like that, maybe you've got a bunch of 12 people meeting rooms, and I've had this happen with one of my customers. They've got a builder in and cut them in half because the average head count was between 4 and 6. And the most that they saw in the 12 people meeting rooms was 3 to 4 people at a time. So rather than, this fallacy of I have 100% utilization of meeting rooms. If 2 people are in a 12-person room, that's not 100% utilized. They're actually in the wrong room. So then what you need to do is you need to measure the data and actually pull it out over time. And again, pull it out via API. Yeah. Yes. So there's API at the workspace level, and then there are device APIs as well. So it just depends on what are you thinking of playing with?
To pull out some of the people occupancy data required connected to the individual device.
Yep.
And doing it that way through some sort of a.
Yeah. So we publish workspace APIs as well as device APIs. So we're trying to make sure that as we deploy new capability, we'll build a library for it, then we'll publish the APIs for it. Basically, if you go to developer.webex.com, I can share some links after this. We try to make sure that every 6 months we should be at least releasing a new API library so that you can get at some of the new capabilities in it. And then that way you can then use the data the way that you want. We build treatments like this, whereby, we'll do it to a level that we think is comfortable for everyone. If you need that super granularity, like you go into the mining sector and things like that, they'd have a really different use case from a retail sector. We'll try iterate it to a level where everyone gets a good quality of information out of it. Because again, this is fleet management, really, and it's about justifying spend. Like, I've had to help customers where we've had to build business cases and things, but when it's a data-driven conversation, you can actually say, these units are doing X amount of hours of video. We are doing this much time on it. This is how we're using it. We can even show you how, how many people are wirelessly sharing versus doing a cable share, things like that. And then, take it out via an API. And then actually then play with the data on the platform that you want it. That's also important when you're talking to property, because a lot of the environmental data sets, that's what property are really interested in. And we're talking to as many property teams as we are technology teams. We are seeing a bit of a divide between property and tech where, property kind of put one thing in the room, tech might put the other thing in the room, and it can actually diminish the user experience. The fact that, if you put one of our touch panels on a desk and you've got temperature, humidity, and air quality out of the box, property are interested in that. Because we looked at it internally. The reason this got developed was Cisco was starting to do this in the States, and we were spending between $3,000 and $5,000 a room to smack a hole in the wall, put in the sensor, pull the cable back, and we still didn't have a platform to actually run it all out of. Environmental metrics, so you can see across the top, like as I said, sound, reverberation time, temperature, relative humidity, and air quality. And again, it's the same as 2 hours, 7 hours, days, weeks, months, and then again, pull it out via API if you need that longer view of it. Any questions around that? All right, so then how do we aggregate all of that up? So this is where we get into the kind of at scale of if you've got hundreds of endpoints, how is the ecosystem living, breathing, and behaving? So where we can go into is actually showing you what by, and when you create these endpoints, we didn't go into that level of detail today, but you'll set what the occupancy is. You'll actually set if it's a huddle space, how many people are in it, because all these little bits are important around it because that makes the data relevant. If it's just a room with a name and you're pumping out data, then you've got to take it out via API to manipulate it. So we allow you to even do things like tag rooms. So you could put tags against your C-level suite. And then you could actually interrogate and sort your data via a tag as opposed to the room name. So if you've got like a high VIP floor, how's it performing? Go. No. So what we do for the partner ecosystem is we give you a partner layer with which your customer layers below it. No customer will be multi-tenanted on. It's the minute you start talking about single sign-on or two-factor or things like that, it doesn't lend itself to that way. So what we do for the partner ecosystem is you'd actually have a partner view with all of your customer tenants below it, and then you can manage it from there. Yep. You'd pull it out via API. Yes. Yeah, it's more just around privacy and security in that lens. But to stand up any SaaS product inside of a customer, you've got to go through security first. Whilst there may be instances of the platform that are multi-tenant, that where they are on shared infrastructure, when it comes down to data and things like that, I don't know that there's many with an appetite to coexist within ecosystems and things like that. Yeah, we've not seen a demand for that at the moment. So the way we address is we actually allow the partner to kind of herd all of their control hubs into one portal and then provide that management layer on it. So a little bit about that utilization over time. So again, you can see we can actually filter down. So we can actually pull and actually drill down to how the desk's performing, pull out those views. So if you're preparing like a treatment for your leadership because they want to know how their investment's performing, you can actually then show them that granularity in the grid view over time. Another nice stat, and this one is pretty popular amongst a lot of customers, is who's not showing up to the meeting rooms. So we can actually report on the ghost meetings. So because we can see, hear, and detect everything in the room, if no one actually comes in, we can then see that there's been a ghost meeting and that it hasn't actually occurred. You can take that a step further where we've had customers, as you build maturity and kind of confidence in their business, you can do things like auto release the rooms and things like that. Because again, we're just referencing Microsoft's Exchange calendar, which is the right source of truth. So there are like workflows that you can apply over it, but you'd build those in over time. You wouldn't introduce things like that on day one. That'd be another thing. There are other things as well in the Teams display, like you can actually walk up to the panel, do your ad hoc booking, release rooms and things like that. And then it's about how the actual fleet's being used. So like I said, we can tell you a lot of things about how it's performing, how many hours of video it's being used for at an individual layer, at a group layer. You can tag it to actually then get those views built out. Now, the nice part about it is then how is the actual unit being used? So displays are actually a really good one. Some customers want to promote Miracast. So how do they actually do that? Well, first they understand how their units are being used. So go in, is everyone using a cable? Because there are customers who ask and they say, could we take the cables out of the room? Well, the first thing you should be doing is just checking how often the cable's actually being used, because that means you need to run a comms training and adoption program before you do things. If you're going to take a cable out of the room, it seems like a trivial matter, but if the business isn't prepared for it, if they're not educated, if they're not comfortable with pushing Windows K, it does seem simple, but some people just aren't there yet. You can actually then turn it into a data-driven conversation where you can actually in that stand-up meeting turn around and go, okay, we need to do these things before we start talking about removing a cable. The other part around fleet management as well is that instead of just buying more endpoints, deploy your endpoints more, productively. If you've got an endpoint that's only doing 5 hours of video a month, it is not needed in that area. Go and find the areas that are hammering video and put the video there, because that's where it's actually being utilized. Anything to add on that? And then finally, this is something new that we've introduced, is actually device energy consumption. So you'll notice the actual kilowatt usage. So because we've got 110 and 240, you will actually change it to the right consumption method that you want. And then what you can even do is set up things like setting up office hours. So this profile is built whereby we're not being that energy efficient. We can then actually click on it and then apply office hours to our endpoints. So then when it comes to 5 p.m., we'll force it into a low energy mode. Every device actually is geo time zone aware. So that's how we make sure we push updates out at the right time at 2 a.m. and things like that, and not during the day. And then again, it becomes a conversation for the business. How is the fleet performing? How are we saving money? How are we not, leaving things on and actually running up the power bill and things like that? Environmental sustainability targets are becoming a big thing in the enterprise. We're actually seeing it in Europe where executives are actually being KPI'd now on sustainability. So how do you actually give them information to prove that they are being a good corporate citizen? It's things like this that we're building a view of, and then we just expose it. And again, if property wanted this information, we wouldn't encourage them to come to Control Hub. They've already got enough portals. They don't want another one. Set up the API access, get them the right API key. And around that API question, it's key access as well. So it is secure. You can revoke it. It is their data. It is not ours. So they can take the data at any point and do whatever they want with it. Any? Cool. And that's pretty much us. So what we're trying to build here is just a platform whereby it doesn't matter what meeting platform you're going to. customers are going to get a great native Microsoft Teams experience, and we're going to continue to iterate capabilities on it, provide operational efficiencies. There was an earlier session as well where we talked a little bit around the admin thing. If anyone wants to have a look at this, it is downstairs as well on the Optus stand. You can have a look at it. If you want to tap me on the shoulder, I've got a lab running. In terms of getting access to these things, speak to the guys at Dicker. They run a great partner program. Speak to the guys at Telstra. There's plenty of capabilities whereby this isn't something that we lock away. We publish sandboxes and capabilities where you can get access to them and run with it. Any questions?